Hello, everyone. My name is RayAndra Nairn, and today I am presenting on Markan priority for our PechaKucha presentation. Of course, this is our BIB 203 class with Professor Jack Gibson. Please enjoy. So, what is Markan priority? Well, it's the viewpoint or hypothesis that states that Mark is the oldest gospel written and was used by two of the other synoptic gospels, Matthew and Luke, as a prototype for their gospels. John is not a synoptic gospel. So, a fun fact about Mark is 93% of this gospel is found in the other two synoptic gospels. This is solid evidence to prove that Matthew and Luke used his information as a foundation for their gospels. Now, prior to the 19th century, Mark was widely rejected by the theological community, stating that it was nothing more than an abbreviation of the other Gospels. So, since we're talking about rejection, I thought it interesting that Mark was first seen as inferior to Matthew's Gospel, and research indicates that there was somewhat of a rivalry, a theological rivalry between the two. Now, Mark's style was pretty unpolished when compared to the other synoptic gospels. It was rough around the edges, straight to the point, abrupt, while Matthew and Luke's were a lot more refined. So one can't help but think that Mark was definitely outnumbered in the theological community at first. And next up, I'm going to talk about a few specific voices that critiqued his gospel. First up, we have William Reed, who advocated the messianic secret that states Jesus tried to hide his identity throughout Mark. And second, K.L. Schmid, who said that Mark isn't reliable, mainly because of its oral-based tradition. But theologians like C.H. Weiss and Christian Wilkie counteracted those arguments in the late 1800s. Then H.J. Holtzman later on agreed with them, and shortly thereafter, the consensus was widely accepted that Mark was indeed credible. And so now we're looking at a slide that depicts a popular theory called the two-source theory that simply supports the idea that Luke and Matthew use Mark as their main source. On a lighter note, we're introduced to Papias, an advocate for Mark's gospel, stating that he was an actual interpreter for the Apostle Peter, who walked closely with Jesus and proves that his oral accounts are indeed reliable. As it relates to the structure of Mark's gospel, you'll find that it's fast-paced, it's action-filled, it's short compared to the lengthier synoptic gospels. But regardless of these facts, we can definitely trust this gospel. Additionally, when talking about Mark's structure, it can be compared to a kaleidoscope of passages, and due to its short nature, the transition between different stories are rather quick and abrupt. Thematically speaking, Mark groups his stories like the pattern of a quilt. At first, it may not seem very clear, but once you take a step back, there's almost as if he has an organized pattern going on. Something like a mosaic. Markan themes depicting Christ as Messiah, suffering servant, and the Son of God particularly help readers to see the dawning of a new reality, and it's based on Christ's journey to the cross. So we've covered themes, we've covered critiques, we've covered arguments against Markan priority. Now we'll look at the conflicts within Mark's gospel. These conflicts help us to see the various comparisons between major characters in his gospel account. For example, we see Jesus versus the demonic, which is one of the leitmotifs seen throughout Mark's gospel. It's a clear indication of the authority that Jesus has as the Son of God over the kingdom of darkness. Additionally, Jesus' relationship with the 12 disciples compared to his response toward the religious leaders he interacted with is quite interesting and shows us the kind of conflicts and attitudes that arise within Mark's gospel. Mark shows us Jesus' willingness to eat with sinners and how it angered the religious leaders of the time. But this was the nature he took on. He came to seek, save, and serve those who were lost and in desperate need of him. Last but definitely not least, Mark mentions the Last Supper in his gospel, and it shows us the kind of eschatological dining experience that believers can have with God once they've accepted Jesus into their heart and made him Lord and Savior of their lives.